Welcome to the Hourly Podcast, where we dive deep into the stories of leaders who are shaping the future of work and organizational culture. I'm your host, AJ Rakiki, and in today's episode, we dive into the story of Shideler Bennett, a seasoned entrepreneur and multi-unit franchisee who has shifted from sales to franchising and discovered his passion for empowering others along the way. In this episode, we explore the secrets behind Shideler's exceptional retention rates, fueled by a vibrant atmosphere, flexible schedules, competitive pay, and enticing perks. Learn how and why hiring from within and nurturing talent are key ingredients for maintaining a thriving culture. I'm excited to unpack Shideler's entrepreneurial journey filled with valuable lessons, inspiring anecdotes, and actionable insights that will ignite your entrepreneurial spirit. Shideler Bennett, how's your day been today?
It's good. I was rushing home from a lunch to make it here just for this. So I didn't get pulled over, thankfully, so it's a good day.
Yeah, that's all good. No, thanks so much for being on the show. I've followed you on LinkedIn for quite a while. Dare I say LinkedIn influencer based on your content and engagement.
I am striving to be one, you know.
Yeah. You can check the box there because it got us here. So at the very minimum, you got invited to a podcast through the world.
Well, I am honored. Thank you.
Yeah, love it. But no, I mean, I love your story, starting in sales, getting into franchising, and now helping others get on the same path.
Right.
I don't want to get too deep into your franchising because I think we should start in kind of how you got started in sales and what brought you eventually to franchising, and what drives that passion here today.
Yeah, it's a great question. So going into college, I thought so my dad was a dentist, and I thought being some type of, medical professional was in my future. I thought maybe I would take over the family practice and did my first semester of school. In that time, I got recruited to go do door-to-door sales, to go sell pest control. And, I had a great time, and I made, I think, like 35 grand in my first summer working about 3 months. And for me, that was enough money to say, like, I know I can make money without having to go be a dentist. And that was enough to just say, like, okay, now I know I don't care enough because that was enough money for me, right? I was like, okay, I can make money other ways. So I immediately dropped out of the pre-dental program, went to, I think, just general business initially, and then ended up doing financial planning as my degree for my bachelor's. And I did finish, but in that time, a lot of entrepreneurial pursuits, tried to buy different businesses. I actually did buy a farmer's insurance agency, which, technically is a franchise that I ran while I was in college, sold that when I got out. And then I bought into an independent book of business for insurance. And that guy was one of the first Crumble Cookies franchisees. And me and a partner who went there, we helped him move a mixer into one of the stores, and he would just light up when he would talk about it. He'd be like, this is crazy. Like back in the day, I mean, they're opening these stores for $200,000 and paying them off in like 6 months and just growing. Like the sales were growing, the social media was taking off. It's this unbelievable rise that we were witnessing front seat, and we were like, wow, if this guy's doing this, we should just go for it, essentially. I joke now that I probably would have maybe never started if I got into franchising and had to look at all of the different options that there were, because there's so many, right? That the decision fatigue could have prevented me from starting. But we just said, you know what, we're going to apply. We got investors on board with private money, and they got approved. The investor said yes. The operator said yes. And long story short, went from 0 to 9 stores, basically over a 2-year period. Just really me and my partner learning a ton. I mean, kind of coming with a little bit of a tech background, saying we're going to A/B test different services, different softwares across these 3 groups in 3 states. And again, lots of mistakes, but have grown. And now, fast forward to today, we have a VP of Crumble that runs all 9 stores, and we totally slammed on the brakes. We thought we'd be around 20, but we're waiting to see what happens. And my full time now is spent helping business owners get funding, helping investors put those funds into some of those businesses, getting a low risk opportunity to get some more cash flow by lending their money out.
It's amazing. And congratulations on that journey. A lot to unpack there. A few
Right.
things that we'll have to double tap. The first, let's talk a little bit about what I believe to be something that's not true is around entrepreneurial mindset and franchising.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of people think that if you're entrepreneurial, you have to start your own burger joint. You have to cook your own cookie store, or you have to start your own home healthcare facility. And it's amazing. It's like 8% of GDP is franchising. But I think what you would argue, and I'm just curious to hear your thoughts, is that you can be highly entrepreneurial, free thinking, but use the constraints and the structure of franchising in order to your advantage to accelerate growth. Any thoughts around that? Because you strike me as somebody where, as a kid, you had lemonade stands, you were selling duct tape wallets, and the door-to-door pest control thing is you're a hustler, right? And I think on the surface, for those that don't know and those thinking about franchising, might not think that those two ideologies sync. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, it's funny. I actually think I was less money driven in growing up because I didn't really even understand the value of money. I was just like, if I can buy my school clothes, and I'd work hard for that, doing, different labor jobs and, fundraisers for baseball and things. I think I probably put my sales skills to use trying to just date as many girls as I could growing up. And that's where my sales ability was being utilized. Probably not the best use of it. But yeah, I think there is this misconception that, you jump into franchising or into business and you've got to go figure out these complex, things, and you've got to have this beautiful brand, or you've got to pick the right thing. And it just seems like so much of it is getting started and doing it in as risk averse way as possible, right? Where there is this weird ego that comes with taking a big swing and being okay with just losing it all. And I do think that there's much simpler ways to jump in where, if you're interested in starting a business, working at one of these establishments before really could just save you so much heartache and and stress, because then you get an idea of it, right? And then it's like, okay, now build a relationship with the owner, and now see if there's someone else locally that would sell a concept similar to you. And instead of just saying, you know what, I'm going to pick something I totally don't know, I'm going to take a loan on it, and we're going to just shoot from the hip. It's like, there's a lot of reasons why that could be stressful. And I think if you could break that down to say, my goal is to be my own boss, but maybe there's some steps I could take to prepare for that. So I don't know if that answered your question well, but
it does. And as you transition, I don't want to say to the lone wolf, sales minded, buying books of business into Crumble, which requires a bit of a team in order to do, right? And the podcast is all about hourly workers. We talk a lot about the humanization of the workforce, as well as benefits and things that you can do in order to optimize the output, but also just do things that are right for these hourly workers. Any early learnings on that transition from buying books of business, doing the insurance agency, to kind of be thrown into I don't want to say quick service restaurants. I don't know if that's how you would classify Crumble, but retail based food.
Yeah. So getting in and starting to work with employees at the ground level, I think is the best way to start, because again, there's no other way to really understand what they're going through than to get in and, in my case, make some cookies. And unfortunately, we had contractors that stole our, materials and our money. So even before we had people coming in and actually working in the stores, we were physically doing the labor to build these stores with our hands. And there's an extra layer of just gratitude that you have for just the space that you're in, and then that much more, pride of ownership of saying, I want to keep this clean. And so when I'm in there with the employees, I'm really coming in saying like, oh, let's really try to keep this clean. Let's do our maintenance on the machines. Let's just those little things. And we had operators in all of our groups initially, but found out that I couldn't do a good enough job understanding their role if I didn't get in and do many of those tasks, because then I would look at the labor percentage and see, hey, why is that high? And as they would give me excuses, if I didn't understand the business well enough, I couldn't really push back. And these are my friends, right? They're your partners. So in a way, you're trying to keep them accountable, but you also know, hey, well, if there's other people that are getting better results than us, what can we do, and how can I push you to replicate that if I don't really get the business or have someone on my team that came from that world, right? And
I'm just
so
imagining you with like a hairnet in the middle of the night, cooking a bunch of or baking a bunch of cookies and working kind of shoulder to shoulder with these hourly workers, trying to optimize different ways to reduce cycles, reduce costs, and make as many cookies as you can in a short period of time. Right?
well, and the
Imagine that for IT.
nuance,
Yeah.
yeah, you're totally right. And the nuance with Crumble is because the menu rotates every week, there's a lot of logistics that go into that and sourcing ingredients and things. And so that's one of the things that we've tried to do is reduce the amount of things that they have to worry about, where we have an inventory manager that does it for all of the stores, and we'll even try and send with like Walmart Plus or any delivery service, send it directly to the store so they don't have to leave as much. Any of these roles, our philosophy has always been try to pay the most that we can, but there's always a cap on that. But then also try to make their job as simple and as attainable as it can be, so that when people ask, we might not be the highest paying job, but our employees, we want them to be able to say, you know what, we feel like they take care of us, and we feel like for the pay, it's a good job, right? Like it's not like miserable or anything. So
And
working on both ends to make it a
yeah,
good place to
but
be.
what's interesting is you're actually the first franchisee that we've had on the show. So we've had CHROs of franchisors like Inspire Brands, Checkers,
Cool.
Rallies, and Uno's. And one thing that constantly comes up is this idea of joint employer,
Yeah.
right? And that franchisors have a hard time at times with suggesting or mandating certain people practices because they don't want to be liable if they tell you to do a certain thing and then it's illegal or you get
Yep.
sued and then you pass the onus on to the franchisor. And
Right.
so what an emerging trend here is franchisor wants to help in its people practices and processes, but at times don't feel comfortable because of joint employer. So
Right.
from your perspective, the franchisee, how much responsibility or how much do you look towards the franchisor to give suggestions, just knowing that dynamic? And what are some of your thoughts around that?
Well, because we have stores in California, Tennessee, and Michigan, the labor standards are different, and especially in California, much more strict. And
Were you
Crumble,
in the $20, or is it because you were a bakery it was
yeah,
reduced?
we are a retail bakery is what we're classified as, so we don't fall under fast food. Which if you go into our stores, it's you take things out, but it's definitely a bakery. I mean, we make everything in house. Like just this week, we're doing like a full sheet cake of tres leches, and so it's like a full family size. Where it's like that's it's a bakery, right? But Crumble earlier on grew really fast and really didn't, I don't think, probably hired enough HR consultants or whatever. We're really just trying to stay open, trying to keep the cookies in stock because the sales were so great that they got in trouble for hiring, I think it was like 14 to 15-year-olds that then worked outside of set parameters. And it's funny because the news headline could be like, oh, they're working these young kids like to death or whatever. And really, if you're anyone who is involved with it, it's like, you've got some young kids that maybe depend on their family situation or homeschooled. I had some homeschooled employees that were like, yeah, we want to work. Like, there's nothing like malicious or anything going on. You're not forcing people to work long hours. But because of that, that's when more of the like bigger corporate decisions had to come down and say, okay, now basically try not to hire anyone of these ages, or like now they're following up with us much more. And for our group, we've found that, it's almost just easier to hire people 18 and above if you can for those situations, just because it's like, you don't even want to have to think about it, right? Like there's enough going on that the last thing I need is checking on my younger employees if they worked an extra hour or two, right? So,
Yeah. Because like for me, so much of the benefits of the franchise network is standardization amongst location to location. As
right,
you go from 9 trying to go to 20, trying to go to 50, you have a pretty good idea of when you're opening things, how it's going to work, where
right,
the sign goes, what the branding is, and all those different things. And I write about this a lot in our book, but it's when it comes to people practices, the franchisees are kind of left out on their own,
yes,
where you have kind of this challenge in that people that adopt franchises versus independent mom and pop shops on their own brand because they want that standardization. But when it comes to potentially the most challenging piece, which is the labor part and
right,
the people part and the hiring part and the retention part, it's like, we can't really help you that much. Right.
right,
And,
right,
um, like a big part of, I think, the benefits of being part of a large franchisor is kind of the employment brand and the programs that they give you, but what I've matured and I think what I'm hearing more and more to hear on these podcasts is despite best efforts from corporate, um, a lot of it is individual cultures, store to store and franchisee to franchisee. So
yeah,
if you go to one that's managed by you and your group versus the one here in Charleston, South Carolina, cultures are going to have micro differences, right?
yep.
And how do you think about that, and how do you just across your 9 locations ensure that you're getting similar cultures, or do you even care? Like, what's your thought?
Yeah, that's a great question because initially we thought that we could give more autonomy than we now have, because we were saying, well, each manager might have a slightly different management style. So we'll let a little of that bleed into the cultures of the stores that they manage. And what we found was, again, it kind of comes back to accountability. If these managers are not getting the results, and as you know, much of results is driven by culture, a culture of excellence, a culture of like being accountable and doing things to make your fellow employees' life easier, right? If those culture things aren't established and now numbers are sliding, and the only person you can go to is that person in charge and say, why are these things not at our benchmarks? If they're not all following the same thing, again, it comes back to it's hard to identify what the problem is. And so it's funny that we've gone from such this like kind of mom and pop franchisee group to now feeling why people become more and more corporate, and still trying to retain that smaller feel where we know the employees ourselves and those things, but really trying to standardize it. So uh, you keep that culture across. I can walk into any of my stores and I know that it runs this way and this is the attitude that we want to have, and all of that.
Yeah, and so let's just start with kind of like the selection of, well, let's start with how do you define that culture, right? Is it you get together with all the general managers and you kind of say these are our core principles? Do you have a different framework for it? Just for other listeners that are similar size group and want to get this under control at their locations.
Yeah, we got to a point where we decided that a book that I'm rereading is called Traction by Gino Wickman, and it's if everyone in your organization doesn't understand the vision, if you can ask different people and they give you different answers, you're missing something. And so we've tried better and better, and we can always do more on this, to have our own set of principles within our group, which for us, it's do things the Crumble way, which basically, you know, any franchise that you're going to be a part of, you could say, do it the way the franchisor asks you to.
Right.
There's a place for everything, and always have a game plan. That's kind of like our core things.
Those are the three?
Those are the three. If you can break down, it's kind of like those are the principles. If you can bring back any mistake or anything that's going on, there's probably a breakdown in one of those three principles, because we'd find that if someone was inefficient with their team, it's probably because their store was unorganized, and now they're doing more movements than they need to, which now they're stressed, and now there's more hours and there's more waste. And so you're like, okay. And if the cookie quality wasn't up to our expectations, okay, what is it in the brand standards that you're not keeping, or the cleanliness of the store? If our franchisor walked in, we want to get 100% on our audits every time. So we try to bring up those principles as much as we can with interactions with our leaders. And that's hopefully something we do every meeting, is bring that up, saying like, out of those principles, how are we doing? Really?
Yeah. And so if I walked into one of your Crumble locations and I said, what is the vision for this business? What you're saying is everyone would tell me the same thing.
I would, in a perfect world, they would.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, like that's the type of stuff that gets me really excited, and you know, it's good to hear that operators are maintaining that sort of accountability at the store level, right? Because I think it's easy because you're dealing with, let's just say, the general managers of the operators every single day, but to have that as a target for everyone, whether they make $9 an hour or 90 grand a year, have that same philosophy, right?
Right. Right.
And is it no, have you been able to scale that? How effective has it been as you've read that book and put it back into action?
So the last year has been crazy because the sales declined over the last year, and I did a post about that recently, saying that like adjusting to sales volumes is one thing, right? Labor is difficult, waste is difficult, but what's really difficult is readjusting expectations. And that has caused a change in our leaders, right?
Yeah.
So some people said this opportunity is no longer the opportunity that I thought it was. So now we're shifting. And I feel like we're just now really feeling stable with the people that we have. People, you know, you say that you can only go as well as the people on the bus. And I feel like we have the people that are in the right seats. And now that culture, I feel like, is really seeking in. But again, it's something that is a constant battle, especially when you've had changes in leaders, and some leaders don't promote it like you think they will, right? Yeah, lots of thoughts on that, but
give me and our listeners a synopsis on kind of how many hourly workers you have inside of one location, and how much those people make, and you know, what the turnover and some of the challenges you have right now, just kind of at that store level.
Thankfully, Crumble is a brand that really attracts that entry-level worker. So we're across multiple media channels. I think there's like well over 10 million followers, and very prominent on TikTok and Instagram. And so we actually get people applying all of the time. And I've been shocked at the retention that we do have. I mean, I would say we're probably like 80% retention. People that are sticking around for, you know, we've not been open that long, so 2 years, and we have many of the same people that started with us 2 years later, and they really dealt with a ton of challenges. I mean, when we were opening stores, we would have to have 50 to 70 employees to open, and right now I would say we average around 20 to 30 employees per location.
And
But
what do you think? And you know, a big reason I ask this is we talk a lot about perks and programs that other operators can implement in order to have these similar numbers, right? So 80% retention is fantastic, right? Like average in restaurants or average in bakeries is hovering 150%. So you're twice as good as everybody else. And you credit, I think, the recruitment to how cool the Crumble brand is. And I know this intimately because I remember during COVID seeing all my favorite celebrities opening up Crumble
Yeah.
cookie places. Be like, what is this? Like,
Yeah.
and wanting to try one, right? And
Yeah.
with that pop culture, especially with the Gen Z millennials entering the workforce, probably came in at the right time where people are looking for a place to work. And generationally, we care deeply about the brands that we spend time with, where we spend money with, and where we work, right? So
Yeah.
it kind of hit all those different things to get them to the front door. But there has to be some things that you do after they get hired that gets them to come into tough shifts. I know you guys work strange hours compared to some other restaurants. What are some of those things that you think makes you sticky?
This episode is brought to you by JoJo, an AI virtual recruiter powered by Sprockets. Designed for the hourly workforce, JoJo works 24/7 to source, screen, and schedule interviews with the best applicants for your business. JoJo helps reduce employee turnover and time spent hiring so you and your team can focus on other important tasks. To learn more, head to sprockets.ai/JoJo.
I think inherently you're working with cookies and we play music, and it's just a little bit more of a lighthearted feel than what I've seen in a lot of other entry level fast food concepts where it's a little bit of like, making this food, my job doesn't matter. Where with this, a lot of our customers are really happy and just kind of like you see a little kid see a giant cookie and it's kind of like you can't help but just like smile back at them. So even if my employee's having a rough day, but now, they see some family get super stoked on the cookies that they're seeing, I really believe that that helps. And I mean, the other big part of it is because of the decline in our sales, we've weeded out anybody who wouldn't have stuck around a long time anyways, and we just don't need as many people, and so we've kept most of the good people, right? And because of our schedule, we're really flexible, right? It's a part-time thing. If people want to lower the amount of hours they're taking, we're really cool with that. The pay's good. I didn't answer your question. It's typically, so like California, I think the minimum wage is like 16, 17 bucks an hour. But most of my stores are doing an average of like $3 an hour in tips.
Yeah.
And so, when that goes straight to the bakers, they're pretty happy. I mean, it's hard to find places that compete totally on that with how flexible it is. It's fun. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not like a stinky job or anything. And then being able to kind of tell people that they work at Crumble and bring home a free cookie every night, or, give friends and families discounts. Like, I don't think it's anything overly special. And we do try to take care of our people. As far as just like I said, making the jobs easier, making individual tasks.
Yeah, because I think, and you touched on it a little bit with like the music and to sound young, the chill vibes
Yeah.
of the inside of the location. You think about the polarity of having to work in a very fast-paced QSR location where you're listening to orders on an intercom and you have
Yep.
like 30 seconds to make all the food. And if you don't, people start honking,
Yes.
right? And to your point, what's really interesting I've never really considered is people are buying QSR just for everyday meals. So you're really and they're buying it to be fast. So if you're not, then instantly there's frustration from the customer side,
Right.
right? Where I think about the times in my life where I've been to Crumble is it's always been celebrations. And
Yeah.
you are right. I have always gone with my two kids who are under the age of 5, and they are pumped up, right?
Yep.
And they are smiling. They're high-fiving the bakers. And
Yep.
you go in, it's never really that chaotic. So super interesting. I guess I've never really thought of that. And when you think about, scaling the organization, you have, referral programs as well that your happy bakers can bring in their friends into some sort of incentive? Or when you're looking for people, just you have so much inflow, you're able to get the cream of the crop?
Yeah, I mean, there maybe are one or two of our stores that have a little bit harder time just depending on where they're at. Like, frankly, any of our higher end locations or higher demographic locations seem to have a harder time with getting employees because it just seems like they don't need the money, right? Um, but with that being said, yeah, I mean, I have my hiring stuff shut off a lot because it's just so many emails that we get of people wanting to work. And in my locations that are close enough together, even if one of them isn't getting the response that it's needed, having the scale that we have is a big advantage where we can say, hey, we might not be hiring at this location, but this one's 15 minutes away. You can go work at that one. Or if you need to go pick up more shifts, you can work between two stores and now they're getting more hours. And so it really becomes flexible that way.
Right. And let's say, I know you said you put a pause on the 9 locations for growth. Let's say that you did kind of follow through, or in the future, as maybe rates come down or things improve, you go to 20 locations, right? Are you thinking about general managers you're hiring from other from other brands, or do you think you're pulling them from inside of your restaurants today? And if so, what are some things you do to teach and level people up as they're working for you today at more of the hourly spot?
I would definitely say in our organization, we will always hire within unless, there's an all-star that comes in and just wants to work with us. Everyone, so much of it is the culture of the ownership and them understanding, like in our culture, I trust you. And until you're going to do things that lose my trust, they're going to come to me with questions and I'm going to say, what do you think we should do? How do you think we should handle that? And then after a couple of times with them really understanding that if their idea makes sense and I don't see why not, then I like to give them the autonomy to make decisions and to be empowered, where the same thing, if someone tries to skip the line of command and come talk to me when really they should talk to their manager, me and my owners are always going to push them back to who their chain of command is. And everyone knows that that is the person that you need to talk to. And I feel like in a lot of ways, we've earned the trust of our leaders where they know that we're going to have their back. And that's what's made them want to stick around longer. And we also feel like they then start taking on our same characteristics as leaders themselves. The biggest challenges we've honestly have been taking over when an operator has been done with our, now out of the partnership. We have to go in and now bring the culture that we really want. And really bad habits, getting rid of them are really hard. And so it's almost easier to promote someone, train them the way that you want them to work, than, bring out an outside party that has their own ideas and their own culture. So moving forward, we would definitely we also want to grow. I have such good people that I almost feel this responsibility to grow, to provide more opportunities.
Yeah. No, I love it. And it always comes back to, we're very selective of who gets to come on this show. And usually to get onto our radar, you have to be kind of good with people practice, and overall just like a good person. But as you know, in franchising and just business in general, not to poke at class, there's some bad apples, like operators who truly do not care about their hourly workers, right? Like people who say things like, can this person fog a mirror? Do they have a pulse? Okay, let's get them in. And they don't invest in kind of the well-being of the hourly workers. You seem on the total opposite end of that, which is good. But how can we as an industry, improve just the general philosophies and strategies around people? Just you being a franchisee, being an influencer in that space, like what are some things you've seen be successful, and where do we need to improve? It's a big question, but I think you get where I'm going at.
I feel like right now there's a little bit of a negative fog in the industry a little bit. And a lot of that's just macro factors. The macro economy is so uncertain. So many businesses, not just QSR, not just franchises, not just, there's a lot of negativity I feel like that's out there. And I think that stems from people that now have been, put into tough positions where they're not making the money that they thought. People are having to close down some locations, and there's a lot of adjustment that's happening right now. It's interesting. It seems like when I go into a store that's underperforming, or I'm looking at, people have approached me to say, hey, this portfolio, they're just trying to get rid of it. It's kind of like there's this just negative feeling within the organization. It's kind of everyone feels this failure, right? It's this weird energy. And it almost gets me excited to think, man, there are so many positive, good people that it's not that store, it's not that area typically that is the problem. It's the emotions that are like really being pushed on it. And now if you got a new group in there with a new set of energy, and you put the love and care into these locations, you can really see how there's so much opportunity out there. And for the right people that are willing to put in the work and give people a chance, then there's going to be good that comes from that. Doesn't mean that there's not pain and things that people are going through. But I think on the other side, you can look at that and say, there's still a lot of good opportunity, a lot of good things that are happening. It's just, glass half empty, half full type of thing.
Yeah, no, good points. And last question, because we try to run this at about 30 minutes flat. That's what gets the best results for us.
Right.
It's always the same question that I ask everybody, and it's a 1A, 1B. You may have already answered it, but what is your first hourly job? And 2, did you get fired or did you leave said job? And knowing that we've had guests give hilarious, horrifying stories, but we've also had guests give really romantic stories that tie into their career and their life of success. So where are you on that spectrum, and what was your first hourly job?
I want to say the first job that I really remember that wasn't like going out, because I live in a semi-rural area, and there was always like baling hay, doing fencing. Like I could be busy all summer just being someone for hire, right? And then, I took care of like investment properties and things for family members. But I remember umpiring for baseball. And that was one where, I'm all suited up in my chest guard and my face mask. And
How old are you at this time?
Man, I must have been just a teenager, like 14. Yeah, it's probably like 14 years old. So like I'm like what is that, a freshman?
Yeah.
I'm playing baseball. I'm like thinking that baseball's my thing, but then going in and umping these games and having this family be my best friend and give me a drink and whatever because their team won when I coached their first game, or when I umped their first game, and then going to the next game, they were playing double headers, and making a few calls that they did not like, and it was like I betrayed them. And it was, I felt like I'm a fairly confident person, but I was like, man, I am like, am I doing this right? Like it made me question everything. And after that game, I was like, yeah, this is not worth it. Like, even though it paid better than like any of the hourly jobs that were happening at the time. And I remember it was like $20 or like $25 a game. But back then it was like $9-10 an hour. So it was way better.
Right.
But just the emotional stress that it put me through, it was kind of one of those things like, I don't need that. I don't care that much. I'll go mow lawns.
And I share that trauma with you. My my daughter, who's 5, is on a soccer team, just like a local one, and I had to step in as coach because I made a promise to myself, a very similar thing, that I wasn't going to coach my daughter ever. Yeah, and I was always just going to be dad, just watch from the sideline, all these things. But I had to step in. Just Saturday, and it's 5-year-olds, and I could not believe how intense the parents were. And I was like, guys, we won the game. And I did my very best, but I'm never coming back. But We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being on the pod. And if somebody
Yeah.
wants to get in touch with you, learn from you, learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
I think LinkedIn is probably just the best place to start. I'm putting out stuff multiple times a week, and then there's plenty of opportunities to jump on my calendar and chat if there's any interest in learning more. Message me.
Perfect. And for those that are listening, can you spell your first name? It's tricky.
Yes, and I think it'll be on here as well. But it's Shideler, and it's Shideler,
Perfect.
and that is a last name. People are always like, "Is your first name Bennett or last name?" Whatever. So it's Shideler Bennett.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you again so much. And for the listeners, please look up Shideler on LinkedIn and go from there.
Appreciate it.